Have you ever tried to do something new but been turned down due to a lack of experience? Or maybe you just didn't look the part of what it was they expected for somebody in that particular role. But you knew, within you, you knew that that was meant for you. Well, in this text and sermon today, I hope you'll consider, maybe what's there for you to do? What's your part? I'm going to read from 1 Samuel 17:28 through 40, but I'm going to break it up into three sections. All right. So, first, let me set the stage and then I'll read the first section. So, right now, the stage is we're on a battlefield, right? We got the Philistines here and their champion, Goliath, who's taunting them to send somebody out to fight him, right? And the army of Israel is there on the other side. They've been there 40 days, 40 days, 40 nights. They're hearing this taunting from Goliath, their champion, day and night. And so far, the text doesn't say that anybody actually went out there yet. Um, so on the battlefield, three of the soldiers are, David's older brothers. Older brothers. They're there on the battlefield under the army of King Saul. And so David's not in the army. He is, at home taking care of the sheep. But on this particular day, his father sends him to go over to the battlefield bringing bread and cheese. He wanted an update about what was going on, how his sons was doing, what's happening. So David goes out to the battlefield with his food and he's there and he starts asking questions, to the soldiers, asking, hey, because he's hearing the taunting from Goliath probably. And he's asking, hey, what's to be done for the one that slains this Philistine, and the soldiers are answering him. But here's where we start the story. Okay, listen in. So I'm going to read starting in verse 28 to 31. And Eliab is his one of his oldest brothers. So when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now, what have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? And then he turns away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. All right, so this section is called Support the Goal. Support the goal. When David's older brother saw David, right, his younger brother, right there on the battlefield with food, he did not want his younger brother there, hanging around asking questions, right? This is serious business. There's soldiers here looking at the enemy, right? He was supposed to be back at home taking care of the sheep. His older brother scolded him with his anger. However, others recognized David's possibly naive spirit to get involved, right? Other soldiers answered his questions about what will be done, right? If for the one that slain the enemy. He probably caused a stir of hope, right, within the battlefield, and thus King Saul summoned him, seeking him out to hear what this David had to say. This kind of reminds me of the Episcopal Lent devotional series that I'm reading right now, because today the devotional title was called "Here Comes That Dreamer." Here comes this dreamer, right? I don't know if you recognize that, but that's from Genesis 37, talking about Joseph as he was hated on by his brothers. And the author of this Episcopal Lent series says, I believe that what happens to Joseph gives us insight into our actions towards other dreamers. around the globe. Artists, prophets, truth tellers, whose vision of a more just, equal, and peaceful world disturbs those who are beholden to the status quo. Here comes this dreamer, they say. Maybe David was kind of like a dreamer because here he was, young and casting hope and vision to step out of fear and into victory with God, even on the battlefield. Remember, they had been there for like 40 days. He just got there. His very presence drew criticism from his family. And today, I wonder, how are we supporting others who are in the fight, working towards a more just, equal, and peaceful world? David's older brother was angry with him for butting in with his questions and with his presence, right? And lack of skill. He wasn't even a soldier. However, other soldiers answered his questions, and Saul gave David an audience to hear what he had to say. So, support the goal. Now I'm going to read starting at verse 32. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Name your why. So David remembered what God had done through him to protect his father's sheep. Remember, he recounted to King Saul, he recounted how he killed the lion and the bear. He said that in response to Saul saying that he wasn't old enough or skilled enough to be out there in battle. David spoke up about what he had been able to do through the help of God. David believed and trusted that God would do the same again, even in this new context. His passion was evident and contagious, so much so that King Saul relented and supported him to send him out. So here's something to consider. So I don't know if you heard this story, but there is a story that I just ran across, which I think is pretty inspiring, where a Spanish runner, Ivan Fernandez, urged and even pushed a Kenyan runner, Abel Mutai, who he had stopped running right at the end of the race, but he hadn't actually crossed the finish line. And so when this runner, Ivan, was interviewed by flabbergasted, news people saying, "What are you doing? Like, why didn't you win? You could have won. Like, why did you do that? Why did you push your component there ahead so that he could win? Why did you do that?" This Ivan said in response, he said, "Well, what would my mother think? What is the merit of my victory?" The now second place runner, Ivan, said, "My dream is that one day we can have the kind of community life that pushes ourselves and others to win as well." It was important for Ivan to compete well by refusing to take advantage of the situation that just showed up, right? He instead wanted to urge his peer forward to keep going and to finish as the rightful winner. That was what was important to him. And that's what he did. And likewise, David knew his why. Even if others didn't recognize it, he knew that he was able to fight and that he would fight because God was with him. That's where he placed his trust. He fully trusted in the hand of God on his life and spoke up about this to the king. Now, I'm not sure what went on in King Saul's mind as he heard David sort of tell him these things and respond in this way, but he became committed to helping David live out his choice and get that chance. That's also like in my situation, even though it was uncomfortable, I've had to speak up for myself as well and recount to others who didn't know all the ways that God had worked through me to do big things or small things, it doesn't matter, but that God was here and that God would continue to be here in this new project or scenario, So um I had a why within me. And when given the opportunity to share that with others, I most certainly did. So name your why. Here in the next section, starting at verse 38, we're going to wrap up this story, right? Of uh, playing our part. All right. So, verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. This section is called Be Yourself. So with good intentions, Saul gave David his battle gear. Remember, he's king, so it's most surely a top of the line. But Saul put it on, but he realized he can't. He that was meant for Saul. It wasn't meant for him. So he decided to take it off and to go as himself. Right? He realized that what worked for Saul was for Saul, but what he had and what he trusted and believed in was that, the same God who was with him before would be with him now. So being fully himself, he chose 5 smooth stones. In Professor Jeremy Dorrell's class on Christian community, one of the things that I learned from that class is a concept called asset-based community development. What that is learning how to go to an area, a community, or to a person and asking them, what gifts do you have? What can you do? We ask that because we expect that God has placed something within them. God has given them a gift. This person, this community, there are things there that they have and that can be used. And likewise, when David went out into the battlefield, he wasn't just bringing food and cheese, like bread and cheese. He wasn't just bringing that. He was also bringing himself. He was bringing himself along with the knowledge of what God had done through him. He's bringing hope through the Holy Spirit there onto the battlefield, which was contagious and spread and gave him a spot to be there. He brought the gifts in him that were placed in him by God to the battlefield. And so, David recognized what he had and he offered it to his community and group. And King Saul joined him in that, supported him in what it was that he was trying to do. So as we all play our parts, right? Consider, what is there for us to do? What's our part to support the goal. What is our why? And how can we be ourselves? You know, and, perhaps not just, maybe this work isn't just for us, but maybe it's for all of us as we encourage one another to be themselves, to name their why, um, to support the goal. Maybe as we encourage one another in that, we would all be able to show our gifts and use our gifts for the glory of God. So, using David's story today, um, may that encourage us to go out and play our parts. Blessings to you.